visiting with people from Coleman's past.
The attorneys turned investigators fanned out across Texas. They retraced Coleman's life and career, from Pecos County to Cochran County to Swisher County. Their mission was to find anything that would call Coleman's credibility into question.
This was a Texas odyssey, that's for sure. Just drove south, headed down to Fort Stockton, Texas, and once we got there, we had some names and phone numbers of people that we knew were people Tom Coleman had known in the past.
Pecos County was where Coleman had his first job in law enforcement, and there, investigators found signs of trouble.
He was known as a person who got himself into trouble all the time. He shot out the windshield of his patrol car in Pecos County. Perhaps most importantly, we learned that Tom had made racist comments to an officer that he rode with on a training mission.
Almost to a man, Coleman's former co-workers described him as a pathological liar. Also as a gun nut. People use words like freak, dangerous. Coleman told them stories about booby-trapping his house when he wasn't there, about this arsenal of weapons that he kept in his bathroom.
In a sworn affidavit, Coleman's ex-wife said that she had seen a Ku Klux Klan card in his wallet several times. Although he denied that race had ever played a role in the Tulia investigation, Coleman has acknowledged using racial slurs in the past.
The word n***, anybody can be a n***, okay? Just not black people, white people, anybody. I'm not prejudiced against black people or any other origin of a person.
Coleman claimed that he was forced to leave at least one job because his wife was out to get him.
She sent papers up there with a restraining order or some kind of paper to make me look bad. And one of my fellow officers that I work with called me and said, hey, we got papers for you. If you want them, come and get them. If you don't, do whatever you want. I said, okay. So I said, I ain't coming in.
Swisher County Sheriff Larry Stewart claimed to know nothing about Coleman's past and said he certainly would have investigated further if he had known about it.
I feel that we did a reasonable background on him at the time we hired him. I worked with the officers in the task force in Amarillo, and I did some interviews with some references, and I believe they did also.
But the defense team came to a different conclusion.
We know they did no background check in terms of calling anybody in Cochran County that could have given them a straight answer. They claim they left a message for the sheriff that Coleman had worked for. He didn't return the call, so instead they talked to somebody, but now they don't know who it was or when they talked to them.
Jeff Blackburn, Vanita Gupta, and their team had worked overtime to compile a mountain of potentially damning material on Tom Coleman. But would it be enough to get their clients out of prison? The 1999 Tulia, Texas undercover drug raid had made Tom Coleman the golden boy of Texas law enforcement. But just 3 years later, the shine on Coleman's star was fading fast. Investigators were uncovering shocking information about his past, including a letter written by his old boss, the sheriff of Cochran County.
The sheriff put a letter in Coleman's official file with the licensing agency for law enforcement officers in Texas that said, this man ought not to be in law enforcement if he's going to do people the way he did in this town.
In 1997, Coleman was working as a deputy sheriff and had racked up almost $7,000 in debts to local merchants. Then one day, in the middle of his shift, Coleman simply left town. He tried to use a local television interview to make his case.
When I would get something, I would pull money out of my pocket and say, no, everybody runs account in all these stores here. And I said, okay, put it on the ticket. It was that way of that community. That's what they told me. I don't have to worry about it. Save it for coffee.
But the more the team dug, the more they found. It turned out that in the middle of his undercover operation in Tulia, criminal charges had been filed against Coleman in Cochran County. He was accused of having used a Cochran County credit card to fill his own car with gas when he worked there. He was charged with theft and arrested, but it was kept quiet.
They concealed the fact of his arrest. They rigged it so there wouldn't be any records made. No mugshot, no booking photos, No booking papers, no nothing. It was a super duper secret arrest.
And, it seems, prosecutors in the drug trials knew about Coleman's prior troubles, but never told anyone. And though the criminal charges against him had been dropped after Coleman repaid his debts, his arrest record would have been vitally important for defense attorneys.
We were alleging that the prosecutor in these cases had suppressed all of the evidence about Tom Coleman that he knew existed. He suppressed all of that at trial. And so no jury in Tulia ever heard anything about Tom Coleman.
There is no record of Coleman ever reporting the charges against him.
Word stood up, unfortunately, in different cases.
He had no listening device, no camera, no partner to corroborate his accusations.
We have someone from the great state of Texas here.
Meanwhile, the scandals were reverberating far beyond Tulia,
An international story, right?
thanks to the work of activists like Randy Credico, director of the New York-based Kunstler Fund for Racial Justice.
We have stood side by side with the black community.
Yeah, I am compulsive. I get fixated on a cause. I continue. I'm not going to, because I can't leave it. I can't leave it until it's over. You know, particularly that case down there.
The number one task of the day for us was to get this story out. To not make this some nice, quiet little thing that the power structure down here could take care of and sweep under the rug. And it was Randy that stopped all that under the rug sweeping from going on.
Working with Blackburn and the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund's Vanita Gupta, Credico tried to get journalists outside of Texas interested in the story.
Jeff and I worked on this politically together by coming up with events together, press releases. I used his office as a base, basically as a PR man in that city. Like it was an advertising firm for the defendants.
How are you, Jeff?
Hi, Grandpa. How are you?
Very well.
Credico worked the media relentlessly,
Hello, Ariana Huffington.
talking to anyone who would listen.
Court TV.
One of the people who heard him was New York Times columnist Bob Herbert.
I wrote 5 or 6 columns in a row initially because I was so outraged by this. And the columns got a very strong response, and the story began to get picked up again. And I absolutely was not going to stop writing about it.
This was not just another story. As the scandal continued to unfold, the defense team began to sense victory.
None of these folks were going to let the story die. They weren't going to just turn their backs and abandon the people who were imprisoned in Texas.
In early 2003, the pressure began to pay off. The Texas Attorney General began an investigation of the Tulia arrests, and the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals ordered a review of the proceedings. For the Tulia 46, it seemed for the first time that an end to their nightmare might be near.
All right, I'll see you around there.
Tom Coleman had always claimed that race had not played a role in his undercover investigation. Even as revelations of his misdeeds came to light, he insisted that the Tulia arrests were good.
I believe we did everything right, Tulia, everything. I don't think there's not anybody in jail that don't deserve to be there.
But in early 2003, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals ruled that Freddie Brookins and 3 other defendants were entitled to hearings to review their convictions. This was the break the defense team had been waiting for.
For the very first time in open court in Swisher County, we're going to have the opportunity to present all of this very significant evidence that we've been able to collect now and put it into open court on the record.
Freddie Brookins began to dream about life on the outside.
When I get out of here, I plan on going, hopefully, to Amarillo College. I'm gonna find some school to go to. I want to go and study business and, do what I should have been doing a long time ago. I have a lot of goals set.
Finally, in March 2003, justice hung in the balance in Judge Ronald Chapman's courtroom. As the hearing progressed, the undercover investigation was ripped to shreds. In the middle of the hearings, an unprecedented development. Prosecutors recommended that the court drop charges against all 46 defendants. Judge Chapman later said, quote, "Coleman's repeated instances of verifiably perjurious testimony render him entirely unbelievable under oath," end quote. The momentum for the defense continued.
Please.
3 months later, Judge Chapman announced that he was freeing the Tulia defendants on bail, pending a final decision by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals.
The court has concluded that the ends of justice would be met by granting the bonds requested.
Technically, the convictions remained on the books, and the defendants could find themselves back in jail. But for now, there was jubilation.
Following a dramatic hearing at the Swisher County Courthouse today, retired District Judge Ron Chapman granted bail and ordered the immediate release of 13 individuals who were wrongfully convicted of drug charges in Tulia, Texas.
I'm overwhelmed. All the way back.
Out of prison and back with his family and friends, Freddie Brookins called his release a blessing.
Boy, well, I think my arms are tired, from hugging. But I probably hugged at least about 100 people at least. Might have been more than that.
It wasn't a total victory. Not yet. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals had yet to weigh in, but the momentum for justice was too great. In August 2003, Texas Governor Rick Perry announced a full pardon for all of the Tulia defendants. With the stroke of his pen, they were free. And a nightmare that had begun 4 years earlier in a massive early morning raid was finally over.
We did what the district attorney should have done before he prosecuted one damn case. We went and investigated what happened.
For those who were part of the story, Tulia is only the symptom, not the disease.
Lots of Americans, they've climbed onto this bandwagon of being in favor of law enforcement. They've climbed on to this campaign of hating crime and criminals. And by climbing onto that campaign and getting caught up in the kind of fervor that's generated by it, they've forgotten all about carefully applying the rules, hard rules that we have.
The fact that innocent people were railroaded, the fact that an incompetent investigation was conducted, the fact that people were just almost in a knee-jerk way convicted and sent to prison. I don't think there's anything unique about that at all.
As for the players in this drama, Tom Coleman's last job in law enforcement ended amid allegations of sexual and financial misconduct, and his testimony in Judge Chapman's courtroom earned him an indictment for aggravated perjury. Sheriff Larry Stewart is now working with activist Randy Credico and community members to foster better race relations in Tulia. Prosecutor Terry McEachern is still in Swisher County. His fate will be determined by the voters on Election Day. In the end, it took more than 3 years to right the wrongs of Tulia. But to those who say our system of justice ultimately prevailed, there is a final cautionary note.
This is a story about the collapse of the criminal justice system in a place called Tulia in Texas. I mean, if it wasn't for the media spotlight that was put on this story, these folks would still be rotting in prison.
The defense lawyers and activists who shined a spotlight on this story have taken little comfort in their victory. The fear is that every day in cities and towns across America, there are more cases just like this one. Collateral damage in the war on drugs. I'm James Curtis. Thanks for joining us.
Coming next, a Crime and Investigation Network premiere. The Wrong Man investigates the Marty Tankcliffe case in which he was jailed for the murder of his parents and raises doubts about the conviction.